future, the governance of our country will take into consideration all the years of research that has been solution-based to give us solutions as a country, pay attention and actually put all that into action. So my name is Adeke Anne Baju. I'm the District Woman MP of Soroti District. I am a member of Parliament on the opposition from the Forum for Democratic Change Party. Extremely endangered now because of all the goings on in our politics, but nonetheless, we are still soldiering on. So I want to thank Akina Mama. I was one of the members in one of their leadership cohorts, and I've stayed in touch with them. Thank you for the work that you're doing for humanity generally. I will not say women alone because it's benefiting all humanity, but thank you very much for your work. To the entire team in Africa, from Africa, serving the whole of Africa, thank you so much. So I was asked by Akina Mama to share my experiences and recommendations for gender just electoral processes and democracy in Uganda. And that's really why I'm here, to share my experience. What is gender justice? When you hear gender and justice in the same sentence, you're thinking about all genders, you're thinking about realization and enjoyment of their rights. So it's about equality. Equality, access, opportunities, regardless of your gender. Now, the electoral processes and generally democracy and governance in our country, what does that entail? It speaks of civic engagement of all kinds. It speaks of free space. It speaks of the rule of law. It speaks of political engagements, political parties. It speaks of civil society, democracy, the entire electoral process, not just only the process of counting ballots, tallying and declaration, but all the processes that underpin constitutionalism, democracy and rule of law in our country. So my experience is that the electoral processes and our democratic processes as a country disproportionately disfavor women. The militarization of our politics as a country, the violence that has characterized every single democratic process in our country hurts all of us, but most disproportionately hurts women the most. You know, the bodies of women are very political in their nature. From ages old, our body stories as women. The body of a woman is what extends life to our nation, to our family, to the entire. Our bodies are very political in their very nature. Now, when you look at the amount of violence that is in our politics, and not just now, right from the creation of the nation state of Uganda, from pre-colonial times to date, our engagement with the colonialists, the violence they used at their exit, the transfer of power, the creation of foreign institutions that are unquestionable and can exert extreme violence on the general population, all of that has so negatively affected women and their participation. Now, most currently, just yesterday, you saw how voters, youth, journalists were brutalized in broad daylight. And you have followed the sentiments of people who should take responsibility for the actions of security forces. They are ruthless. They are trying to sabotage what happened. There is a total avoidance of responsibility. We are on our own. I've been, for most of my time, in my younger days, I was an activist. I have seen police officers beat women. I know a senior activist whose uterus was damaged by beating. Just a few weeks ago, I went to Luzira prison to check on the deputy Lord Mayor, along with her co-accused, and found that ladies from the National Unity Platform had just been remanded. And it's so disheartening that people with visible marks of torture on their bodies are presented in a court of law and remanded instead of being sent to a hospital, but are remanded to prison. So all these examples are the reason why women are not very willing to participate in politics. Every social circle they belong to will tell them, will advise them to go slow, because that is the expectation of what they will get in the field. The brutalization, even leading to parliament damage, as I have already told you, those are just few examples. Journalists are burned for life. Women who involve themselves in politics are marked for life. In the society, are marked. There is a stereotype that will place on you. Even in your family, you are marked. So all these things make it incredibly difficult for women to engage. And that's in addition to all the roles that society has put on your heads as women. You are many things. In my life of activism, I met women who would come on the front line and they're telling you, I don't know how my children are eating today. If I am taken in, I don't think even their father can look for anything. I don't even know if they will sleep at home. So that has really increased the burden for women, because you have to carry all that with you. You can't be the best that you can be because you have a lot of baggage you're carrying already. You can never deliver the way you should actually be able to deliver. Another example, many women, you know, politics is difficult for women, as I have already said, but even more difficult for women in their position. And those examples I have given you can really highlight what I'm trying to say. The recent by-elections. Elections in our country now are war. They are war. So when we are going for elections, we know that we are at war. At least that's the fact of it. I have seen it. I was involved in the 30 East by-election where we were swept clean the night before. At least in Canada, I got a chance to hear the stories being told. What about situations where you don't even hear the stories? Because they don't have access to media. They don't have access to internet. They don't have, it's all in the dark. And where these injustices are being executed against a powerless population. My second issue is about the patronage that has characterized our politics as a country. Everything is about patronage. Patronage to individuals, patronage to classes of society, patronage to tribes. I come from Texas sub-region, very poor sub-region. For some time, they voted opposition. Until eventually they decided to tell them that the reason you're poor and being left behind, the reason why government cannot invest in you as people is because you vote opposition. You can imagine, and that's a national government, a central government. Patronage disfavors women and your participation, our participation. Because who holds the resources? Look at the factors of production in our country. In whose hands are going mostly in? Of course, not women. So that puts women who are engaging in all these processes already at a disadvantage. All that commercialization of our politics and the economic factors have left women disempowered in our country. Yes, many people will argue that we are probably one of the most progressive nations with gender advocacy, the most progressive nations with women representation in parliament. The numbers may be there, but they don't count. They don't count enough to change the life of the grassroots women. Yes, in addition to the social and cultural factors that already disfavor women. You're well aware of all the cultural laws that we are battling against every day, all the social laws that we are against every day, that are inhibiting women's participation. Many cultures still require so many things of women before you can participate in politics and governance and democratic processes. They set up a bar for you, and interestingly, they set a bar for women and no bar at all for men. A rogue who is a man will easily have his way in politics. It's not the same for women. You have to meet a certain standard, and this really varies. It varies, but everywhere there is a standard set for women, which is not the same standard set for men. If at all men even have a standard. These are the realities we live with. Those are the situations we confront every single day in our lives, in our families, in our churches, in our mosques, in our communities that we represent. In my home, where I come from, there are so many gender biases you have to beat as a woman. So the load you carry is significantly heavier than all the other counterparts. So those are my personal experiences. Uh, when you look at political parties, all those things are the reason why membership in political parties is the way it is. It's the reason why leadership in political parties in civil society is the way it is. For you as a woman to really emerge on top, you have to be a disruptor of the status quo. And there are areas where you as an individual cannot confront it alone. You just have to bow and be a part of all the stereotypes. Now, my recommendations, personally, I believe we need to collectively push back as a country. This is men and women. Because violence and militarization has dehumanized even men. Yesterday I watched Salam Musumba give us true facts on the front line. That when they are attacking, when these institutions, these military institutions are attacking people, they don't hit you anyhow. They go for the parts that are most painful, not just for now, but also the future. They are emasculating men because they go for you and destroy your balls. It's not a lie, it's what they do. You've heard testimonies from Kakonza, you've heard testimonies from Edimutwe of the horror that they go through when they are detained. Horrific situations, and you wonder, does this person have a conscience? That you can assert and target the reproductive organs of someone to permanently name them. So the violence in our politics is not just about us civilians. Yesterday, members of the fourth estate were pushing back and saying defend journalists, but I say defend all of us. People used to think this was just about Besigye and people walking on the streets. Time has proved otherwise. Today, if His Excellency is passing on the road, even now, a civilian who's carrying nothing but a handbag cannot cross. People used to feel that it was just politicians and activists, trying to topple God. No, it's all of us now. A couple of minutes ago, I saw a video of someone complaining about his land. Him being thrown off land. And he's saying, all my people fought. They fought for this government to bring this government to power. But here I am. I have all a battle of, what am I saying? That the violence and the militarization of everything regarding governance in our country affects all of us, even people who are apolitical. You're all victims. So let's push back for total reform in our country. Because it's now clear it's not a democracy, it's a dictatorship. I mean, if we are going for elections, why are you have numbers? Many are tankers. Having members of the security forces who are unidentified and intentionally concealing their identities. We really have to reflect as a country. Dr. Besigye likes saying that he's still fighting because he's freeing himself. If it can be our individual burden to all of us free ourselves, maybe we can get somewhere as a country. Because I'm telling you, as long as we have militarization of our politics and the management of our affairs as a country, it will affect all of us, and more, as I said earlier, much worse, affect women. Secondly, well, I would ideally give only that as a solution, because honestly, I feel like it's all that will work. But we can continue to do these engagements. We can engage with women in influential positions, although their influence is also questionable. During the Women's Day debate in Parliament, women in the opposition were saying that we are debating, we are celebrating all these years of women empowerment, and yet you still battle for participating in politics. You declare without trial. Olivia Lutaya's case, a very pitiful situation that brought her to her knees. She had to go after 4 hours in detention, brought her to her knees before she could finally get freedom. Why would you plead guilty of a charge you totally don't know about? It's made all of us so terribly vulnerable. So terribly vulnerable. And dehumanize us actually. Because your freedom is so important. You won't appreciate it until it's taken away. So we can continue to engage them. We can engage the media to spotlight in a very unique way and pop up all these injustices. However, as you know, also the media has not been immune to the patronage. And the story they tell sometimes has a particular angle. They've not been immune to patronage, that's just the truth. It has also tried to suppress the projection of these voices and these situations. So with these few remarks, I feel that all this gender equality and women empowerment we are celebrating for 40 plus years as a country does not truly reflect what we go through every day and how free women are to engage in these processes, in all democratic processes, elections and everything else, because democracy is beyond elections. And I really push for reform and a total reset in the politics of our country. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Honorable Anna Baju, for those remarks. I think what we have heard is very helpful, and I am compelled to ask Dr. Tabitha to really say something from a person who works on these issues from the academia, to help us also to frame that additional discussion from a research perspective. What, listening to what Honorable Baju has said, could be areas of further inquiry that we must not overlook, because gender and politics has been with us for a long time. There have been some gains, there have been some, issues, and she has described the framework quite extensively. But can I ask you to say a couple of things, just to help us to? I know that I have coached you, but being a teacher, I mean, you can always, say something to help us to frame the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Director. Good afternoon once again. I'm Tabitha Muriampiti, Women and Gender Studies of Makerere University. I'm very intrigued by the Honorable speech. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for articulating so many points in a very short time and in a manner that is comprehensible for everybody. I think that's why you are where you are. You're gifted. I was as the as the director is saying I'm a teacher. I was busy noting down things that you raise, which are all important topics on their own. You raised a very important point when you spoke about your personal journey as a young female on the opposition. That is triple jeopardy. How you overcame that is a very important lesson if we are to improve the way politics is done. Young people have entered politics, but other people are saying they've always been there. They've always been there, even the ones we have now came in as young men and women. And so young people have always been interested in politics and have always seen their centrality in the game. But I want us to explore deeply the nexus between age, gender, and political affiliation that you stand for. It's a very important point of discussion because now in the parliament, I think almost 40% of them are around your age or slightly above. That's very important. We need a whole book in that area. Since you're a member of CBR, you should take us through that kind of journey. The other one that you raised, which I think also is very important, and everybody sees it in their own way, is making politics a male standard. Politics is a male standard and requires male characteristics and male tactics if you're to succeed. Politics is made worse if it is even militarized and denoted with violence. The terrain becomes too difficult for any woman. No woman to maneuver. What happens is women end up looking for godparents, godfathers to be precise. You have to have a godfather, and you must pay the price for the godfather. That's why we're wondering where our women, what are they doing when all this is happening? They cannot act on their own. They are completely co-opted. Completely co-opted. It is the silent agreement they made when they were given positions. Sometimes I see women dancing more than the dance troupe at their functions when they are guests of honor. They dance harder than the dance troupe, maybe to shake off frustration. We should approach this with understanding, but also at the same time as academics and researchers, we should attack women who don't fight for freedom, women who don't fight for independence, women who allow the dictatorship to cause provocation. In that way, we don't support women to go to politics, to behave the way men behave, but rather to go women to go to politics to sanitize the politics. As voters and researchers, we should be very critical of women who do politics like men. Why should we vote women? Why should we vote men in women's clothes? If we are to improve politics, it will not happen. The other thing that she raised, also very interesting, Uh, First of all, it came as a glass ceiling that women were not supposed to get to particular positions, even in politics. And there was a glass ceiling. But now, like it's just related to what I just said, you must undress your womanliness to shatter the glass ceiling. Should women undress their womanliness to succeed in politics? Isn't that taking us for a ride as voters? If we voted a woman who's going to undress her womanliness and abandon the woman as a constituency, the women themselves is a constituency, the female constituency. And that's why we agitate for women, more numbers, increased numbers of women, so that we gain at least a critical mass that can eventually cause change. Where will the change come from? If women, as soon as they're elected, they become men, they undress all womanliness, behave like men, and want only the things that they want, what is going to work for the women's interests? An example is the failure, the complete total failure of not domestic, the marriage and divorce bill because of selfish women politicians who had acquired property and felt that they cannot share their property with their men. And said, no, we cannot have a law that requires equal sharing of property. Selfish women made this very important law fail. Each time it comes up, it must fall. We are grateful that the similar, the amendments in the inheritance, the Succession Act, the slight improvement. But it's also still disturbing that you only have 20% of what you worked for all your life. Why 20%? And all you can talk about is a matrimonial home. But then the family can sell it at will if a woman may decide to get married again, when your husband dies. You have to leave the house. It's indecent act, undermining the respect of the deceased for a woman to remarry in the home. And it does not apply to the man. The man can remarry in the matrimonial home. And so it's still shaky, but there's something in there, something small for which we can rally. But again, taking us back, why will we fight for women if all women aspire to do is become men? Yet we know that politics is very critical for women more than for men. Just their biology, the body that she talked about, requires a lot of political action for us to maintain. We need safe motherhood. We need many safe things. Just build our physical health as women. But again, it goes to another level of socio-economic. Which woman does not have children they are supporting on their own? How can a government day school, this 600,000 without food, without meals? This kind of policy, what is it pressing the most? The women. And every graduation party you go to, I want to give special thanks to my mother, mama. Mama, where kumpelera. You know the kind of mama where kumpelera. The women we are failing to take our children to school. Where are we going to take them? School fees is 3 million. A government school, who is supposed to take all this for us, for women? How will they take care of their children? How will they afford food? Food is going up every day. There are no subsidies. I had there's a stubborn woman in the Kenyan parliament who was wondering how the president can audaciously increase the price for ugali, and yeah, like ugali and flour and wheat flour. But who will speak for us in that way? Because we are the ugali buyers, we are the ugali eaters. We and our family, all we can afford as women is ugali, but it's going up every day. Who will speak for us? Who will protect the women during inflations? And so, thanks so much again, Honorable, for raising this. I think I wish you all the best, and I hope that your candidate one day gets out of there, because without him, you might lose some strength, and yet we still want you to get stronger. So we hope he's out of there, and you kind of continue in this direction, and keep on leg with the researchers as you keep the other leg in parliament. Please don't leave the world of research, and always stand out for a woman and not aspire to be a man. Thanks so much.
Unless you aspire to be a gender sensitive man. that is important. But thank you both. Thank you, Dr. Tabitha, for that rejoinder, and thank you also Honorable Ebaju for really giving us a very good sense of where we are with these processes. So now, colleagues, that's the beauty of having a small audience, because all of you now get a chance to say something about what you've heard. But the point we are making here is when you listen to this, for us as researchers, is to say what should be our points of inquiry. What should be the things we should be understanding more, not for purposes of just understanding, but for purposes of improving how politics is practiced, but also how those who are aspiring to come in, can come in prepared. Because when you understand the different dynamics that are there, it becomes helpful. And for example, there are many things you have talked about which are deeply powerful. I mean, to say that, you need, for everything that relates to women, it requires some type of political action. I think it's a powerful, metaphor when somebody tells you that everything nearly, you must have some kind, even if you want sanitary wear, even if you want, access to family planning, even if you want that, all these things require a certain level of engagement with political action. And so certainly I take that point, and I think it's a very helpful way. But we have had many other things. So without being the one to repeat the presentation again, I'm going to ask that Jordan takes the mic around so that those of you who want to say something can say something. Some of them can be questions to our keynote speaker. Others can be reflections. We don't want to put her on the spot, because what we asked her to do was to share her own experience. And that's what she did for us. And also paint the picture so we understand what's going on. But essentially what we want to do is to sort of reflect back and say, what does this mean for all of us? Because that's how we build research. Research is not some people online, but I think for now you can only get comments in the chat room. So when they comment, we shall try and correct those and also use them in the reflections. So those of you who are online, don't feel left out. You can put something. The mic. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, the Executive Director, CBR, Akina Mama wa Africa. I think it is an important aspect of civic development to have such discussions. Anna, thank you so much. She's the last guild candidate I campaigned for in my class. So it is a pleasure, I think, to share this space. I sort of despise campus politics, but at times some people stand out. And I think she's one of those individuals. Thank you, Tabitha. She's my professor, by the way. She's a colleague, but every time you meet her, you learn something new. So thank you so much for the rejoinder. I think it was right to the heart of the discussion, and it touched some of the aspects that I also wanted to highlight. I am David Mugambe Mpima from the now Institute of Gender and Development Studies, and I want to say a few things. I think Tabitha has ably talked about so many other things, so I want to cut those ones out. But I wanted to talk about the aspect of participation, which I think Honorable Ibaju raised, and she was saying that women are not participating. I want to add enough. And I think when we are talking about participation, we want to look at the entire political spectrum. What is politics in this case, and what do you want to see? It is a process that is supposed to allocate decision-making powers. But who is allocating these powers? I think it is the entire electorate, so to speak. But what constitutes the electorate? And what is the participation of women? Are they candidates? Are they simply following the crowds? Are they simply voters, people who are, commanded to go and vote a certain candidate? I think what we need to discuss is the issue of effective participation, not simply to make up numbers. Women are very critical mass that is supposed to, fashion discussions, fashion decisions, and this is not coming out because we have reduced women to simply voters making up campaign numbers. The few that seep through, like Honorable Ibaju, and I'll come back to that point, will tell you, if you look at our political spectrum, you will know that they come on the special affirmative action seats. And I'm going to come back to that. So I think what we need to capture here is that as researchers, as activists, politicians, what are those things that we must do to increase? Because effective participation, you're looking at voicing. How do these women's voices get to shape the debates? How do they own these debates? And what can they do to get to those things? And I think it has been touched. Because we have already heard that politics is highly masculinized. It is a male-dominated space, to the point that you really need to denounce your womanhood for you to fit in. We have heard politics is violent, so you must become violent to fit in. You must be a cheat. We've been growing up and they've been describing a woman as a very humane person. She's good, she's caring, and so on and so forth. But they have become extremely aggressive, extremely violent. They've taken on the characteristics of the men who are dominating the space. So my take here is that I think as we have all these debates, as we do all this research, one of the things we should do is to encourage women to come to this political arena as women. The femininity should stand out. You are not a man and you never become a man. Your positionality is that you are a woman. That is why Tabitha was emphasizing that someone sat there and felt, because for me now I have become a man. There's no way I can share property because now she has amassed a little bit of property. Only about 16% of women hold land in Uganda. about 16%, I think. So the 16% are making decisions for the rest of the other women who have barely access to this land. So I don't want to dwell so much on that. I hope it does speak to some of us. Then the other thing that I want to rope into the discussion is the issue that elections have become war, and I think this one speaks a little bit to all of us, not just the politicians, not just the researchers. You know, the press has been here and there about electoral violence. And they've been seen, I think, patronage here. They've been seen in so many respects, trying to defend the wrong things in our midst, including violence. But how does violence affect a woman? The Honorables just shared here that they make sure that they really embarrass you. It will not matter whether you're a man or a woman. It is worse if you are a woman. We've seen women being dragged on the road, undressed, breasts hanging out. Total embarrassment. You are a woman, yes. Look at yourself. How will your future grandchildren look at you? Your picture is all over the internet, and the internet, we say these days, does not forget. You're embarrassed today and in future. This is what we must talk about. Why do we have the military? Why is the politics becoming more militarized, and what is the positionality of the women in this particular debate? And I think one of the biggest problems why we have a lot of militarization in our politics is because we have a winner-takes-all kind of system. Now, I am at a loss discussing political systems here because I've been a proponent of the parliamentary system. The Honorable knows now it could be hijacked to serve a totally different purpose. Yet, to me, she had a different silver bullet. To me, it is a real silver bullet for so many of our problems. And I've documented some of these in some of my publications. One of them is that if we went parliamentary, for instance, there is no point her campaigning the entire district where there are 4 men who have constituencies. Remember, she has none. She has a district, an entire district, but she has no constituency. There is no point. The parliamentary system would sort that kind of problem. The fact that you're campaigning on a parliamentary system where people are voting parties will sort the issue of money commercialization of politics. Who are you supposed to pay and for what? The list is not controlled by an individual, for instance. So a woman will squeeze in a bit better even when she's not financially very sound. And so many other problems we could go on talking about one by one, the patronage, the violence itself, because who are you beating for what? If I'm going to vote and I know who I'm voting for, you will never get me to beat me up. But now you have to show force. You must come out in numbers and show that you support a particular candidate. You know, in Uganda, it is both parties and individuals at play at the same time. The hangover of the movement system. But what we need to discuss, I think, beyond this election, is whether we need a parliamentary system to sort some of these problems. And then she talked about the fact that actually, you know, women are there, the numbers are looking good, and so on and so forth. Why are the numbers looking good? The numbers are looking healthy because of districtization, the creation of so many districts, hence affirmative action. But figures started changing when we started creating municipalities. Now we are creating cities, and the percentages are going down. Why? Because the constituencies that are being created are not going to favor a woman to come through. These constituencies, the 3, the 4 that are coming up in Entebbe, it's not going to be a woman. There could be a woman MP, but there are going to be 4 other men, 3 other men. And by the time we are done with elections, even the 33% that we usually quote is going to drop to about 29, 28 point something percent. So I think we need to have a large discussion to talk about the things that have sometimes helped us to gain some bit of gender equality, but now they are looking like challenges, and we are quiet on some of these particular things. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Any other comments? To wait for all the using the mic. Yes.
I thought this was a democracy.
No, no. You know, we have construction all around us. There's sounds of progress happening around us.
Well, then you also understand why I wasn't very keen on doing this. Broadly, I would so sorry to the speakers, and I also realize or recognize, just by way of little introduction, my sort of research interests are in constitutional law, human rights. So I'm not a very gender specialist, and I don't know anything about gender, but I would like to consider myself an equalist, if there's anything of the sort. Now, I just want to put a proviso on this, and I understand in the context of what this book aims to do, is not to carry out a post-mortem on what has happened in this country, but I would like to throw some facts at you. Uganda, since the only peaceful elections we've conducted in this country were elections that were organized by the on giving us independence in 1962. That's a fact. Every subsequent election ever has been contested or violent. Relatedly, all political transitions that we've had in this country have been through the barrel of the gun, and have been violent. That's another fact. Now, on the issue of militarizing politics, the first political transfer in this country was through the barrel of the gun. So that set a template for the army as the final arbiter of all political conflicts. And we have never changed that as a precedent. So I think we need to bear that in mind as we look forward. How do we address those issues? And relatedly, because I'm also a student of constitutional law, is every administration in this country has offered a legal regime that will rule that. Does that make sense? It's referred to as one that has been reached through a democratic that was written by the government currently in power. If you look back, I mean, issued a decree over which ruled this country, every regime issued a legal instrument that would be ruled under. So I think there are things that we need to realize to understand where we've been and why we are where we are. The template has been set under which we are. I remember Professor Lokoro wrote a book at the beginning of an article, it was an article, and it mandated new old bottles, new wine old bottles. So it's in this country, But let me briefly speak to the issue of participation. I think on one hand, we have affirmative action programs in this country. One member of parliament, and maybe other people, is part of that interest group that we're seen as disadvantaged, and as such given affirmative, medical treatment. We argue. Because we will not find somewhere, we've got members of parliament from disability, of disabled people, and we have youth, we have women, the work of the army, I think the army has a little to point. The army in this country is very crucial. So that people representatives of the army in parliament. But that type of right, because final arbiter of political conflicts. Whichever way you look at it. The issue of participation is kind of interesting. You know, some of you may be aware, and I don't know how, you know, because my thoughts on this are very structured. On one hand, you know, I remember there was a challenge before the Constitutional Court on the role of women in elections. And in that court, in that litigants argued that contrary to the expression provisions for women to participate in elections, particularly their nature as women. For instance, should there be specific hours for women only to vote? And I'm speaking to the issue of participation. And the court ruled that, you know what, the government does not need to do so. On the other hand, there have been arguments, you know, and there have been decisions from the courts about prisoners' rights to vote and people in diaspora to vote. And the court has said, yes, you need to make special arrangements for these people to be able to vote. Now, my last point before I sit down is the issue of violence against women. Many people frowned at a friend of mine, Dr. Lindsay, was the only weapon at her disposal to carry a message. And people say she's extremely advocating of a woman, advocating of a woman, you know. And recently I've been engaged with young women who participated in those protests against corruption. One of these young ladies came to me and asked, what can I do? And she said to me, the only weapon I have at my disposal is my femininity. And that's the only thing I can use to put up a statement regarding how I feel about corruption in this country. You know, I think I participated in a study about the role of women in the genocide in Rwanda. And what I found interesting in that story is that people in Rwanda sort of understated the role of women and they played a major role in the genocide in that country. But when I spoke to an average Rwandan and said, that is unlike women, that's not woman-like. No woman can do that. Or we need to protect our. So for me, there's a conflict about people shielding themselves in this femininity, gaining advantage from that to a certain extent, and I stand to be corrected. And at the same time, you know, the idea of look at me, I'm disadvantaged. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, there's a lady next to you who wants to speak. Yeah, please let her go ahead, and then we'll take it from there. I think there are many interesting insights that we are hearing from everybody, and you know, it looks like there is a lot to learn around very many topics. The body as a site of struggle, the issues around the multiple layers of challenges that women have to negotiate in the political life, the issues around real patriarchy and how it plays out, how, you know, women have to fight a double fight, first to enter a space that is, you know, restricted, and I think there is a lot more to learn. But let's first hear a few more reflections as we go along. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon once again. My name is Nachimuri Maureen from the Uganda National Medical Alliance for Prisoners Support. Thank you so much for the invitation today. Today we are talking about politics, we are talking about gender. But 2 weeks ago, I was in a meeting and we were around 50 people. And one gentleman stood up and said that, women are naturally weak. Women can't be leaders. I looked at him and wondered, why did they invite us if they think that we are weak and we can't lead? Another thing, another thing, I'm from the prisoner support. Have you ever wondered about the impact of imprisonment for the political women ex-offenders? The impact of imprisonment on their political ambitions after release. You find that when they come back from prison back into the community, they may be seen as heroes or otherwise. People they don't want to engage with them or get close to them because they will be targeted by the security men. For example, there are some women who were imprisoned because they were supporting NOP, but after their release, this woman, after coming back into the community, she was just from her place of work. Even her friends, they started distancing themselves from her because they didn't want to be monitored or even to be seen as a target by the security men. But according to they, I think one of the other things we need to do is sensitization of the communities, including the women, because mere seeing us as weak sex, as people who can't lead, you find that many women, they just sit back and relax. You find that there are many political prisoners recently right now, but most of them are men, fine. And as the Honorable said, that there were some women who were imprisoned, and when they came to court, instead of taking them to the hospital, again they were sentenced back to the prison without even getting enough health care by maybe the prisoner, by the prison itself or the government. So we need a lot of civic education and also political policy reform and also engaging the political leaders. Honorable, if I may ask you, since you know all this, what have you done to support the women, you as yourself? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. She has lots of stories. I think that will be a full other presentation, but we will get to some answers at the end. Anyone else around here? Okay, there is one at the back. Okay, yes, you can go ahead, and then the lady at the back. Go ahead, please, doctor. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. My name is Sharon Erenyu, and I work with Akina Mama Africa. Akina Mama Africa is a feminist and leadership development organization, and our work is focused on women's political leadership, sexual reproductive health and rights, and economic justice and climate action. The speakers before me have really shared quite a lot, in relation to theme of today, but then I would also just like to share a couple of things more like strategies on inclusion. And based on the discussions that we've had, I think the one thing that we need to have at the back of our minds is that there is no democracy without the meaningful participation of women. That is something that has been reiterated differently in the different submissions of today's speakers. And just to say that, while we say that there's no democracy without meaningful participation of women, we need to understand there are other underlying systems that perpetuate this inequality. And some of some of them were highlighted, like the patriarchy. We talk about neocolonialism, neoliberalism, racism. These are all factors that continue to affect the full participation, the meaningful participation of women in politics and also outside of politics. Leadership is not just limited to political participation, but in civic spaces as well and other forms of leadership. So what do we need to do? What are some of the strategies that we need to think of? I mean, these are things that have been happening in the past. We've seen women activists, we've seen feminists champion these strategies and contribute to democracy on the continent and in Uganda as well. And one of the things that was briefly highlighted on, but I would like to speak more on it, is scaling up innovation in campaigns and civic education. And I think she mentioned that there is a negative mindset and public perception of women in politics. And I think you can just see from the stories that are told in the media, vis-a-vis, you see how women politicians are depicted in the media versus how male politicians are depicted in the media. What kind of story is being pushed forward? What kind of narrative is being pushed forward for women in these spaces? And it is important that the media is involved, in these conversations on how they can change the narrative. And because we consume a lot of information in the media these days, everything is in the palm of our hands. You just go on WhatsApp, there are messages being forwarded, there's information, and we really, really do consume a lot, and there's no time to filter that information that is coming through. So it is our responsibility, it is our role to take time to actually question what kind of narrative is being pushed forward about a particular individual, especially women politicians. You find there's always a narrative, oh, she doesn't have a family, she's not married. What is she going to do? How is she going to serve the community? For women, the story is always focused on, is she married? Does she have children? And yet for the man, you'll find he doesn't have kids, doesn't have a wife, but he will fully be supported by the community to lead them. So these are the narratives that we need to change, and also the government has a crucial role in ensuring civic education, and interestingly, this role has majorly been left to civil society organizations. You find people going out, as we prepare for the elections, there's a lot of civic education going on, teaching people about their rights, how they should engage in elections, that they have rights to vote, that they should register here and there, and that this should be the sole responsibility of the Electoral Commission. But you find the burden is heavily resting on civil society organizations with little support from the government. Second, last but not least, I think we also need to institutionalize intra-party democracy. And what do I mean by this? The political party is usually a crucial structure where people get to engage in politics. That's like the entry way for young people, young women, girls to engage in politics at the different levels. And you find that a lot of times there can be tension in these political parties, but there are no proper systems or conflict resolution structures available to resolve this conflict. And then you find that even within political parties, there are smaller segments, and you find that these smaller segments, parts of these parties are focusing more on their own agenda instead of pushing forward the agenda of the political party or speaking as one voice. So if the government doesn't, if there's no proper institutionalization of intra-party democracy, there will always continue being conflict within parties. The ruling party will always find a way to use this as an entry point to further split the opposition, because where there's conflict, there's always going to be an upper hand, someone having, pulling more strings to ensure that this conflict continues going on and that the political party continues splitting further. So with these systems in place, of course, besides just addressing the conflict within the party, but this structure should also help in addressing issues of sexual harassment. Akina Mama Africa has worked with young political leaders, and they've shared stories, disturbing incidences of sexual harassment by their superior political leaders, for lack of a better word. And there's no proper system for them to report such incidences. And this is a cycle that continues over and over again. You find younger women coming interested in in a political office, but you find that there's this person who is taking advantage of their age, and there's always there's always a scratch my back, rather I scratch your back, that's that phrase. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So there's always, but for young women, there's always a catch. There's always something that you have to do this, and that sort of it plays around with the mindset of people wanting to engage in political parties, but then people along the way they just give up and say, I don't want to continue being in a system that's going to continue oppressing me as a young woman, as a woman, as a girl, and as a marginalized person in the community. So I thought those were just a couple of things that I would share in relation to the conversation, and just to continue iterating that we need to look beyond descriptive representation in politics and focus more on substantive representation of women in politics, and that just goes beyond the numbers. There needs to be capacity enhancement of women in these political parties. There needs to be continued engagement with women in these different spaces. CSOs, women activists, human rights organizations, feminists have done a lot of work around around enhancing the capacity of women in politics, but then trying to get them to engage better in decision making and show them their potential and capacity in participating in these spaces. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. It's very helpful insights from Akina Mama. But I haven't had any conversation about something which Tabitha may know about. But if we look back, the women's movement in this country and the national resistance movement at some point converged in 1986. The women's movement was coming out of the International Conference of Women in Nairobi, which was finishing the decade for women 1975-85. That they were betrayed, but other people feel like, well, these gains that came from the women's movement being close to the national resistance movement were in themselves positive. But when you think now, where you are seeing tensions again that are emerging, and the women's movement can no longer speak as a movement on these tensions, but they speak as political party, women in political parties. That in itself is interesting. But I just thought that this is also a point of inquiry to try and understand the historical trajectory of the women of gender and politics, not just women, but gender and politics, as actually it relates to this post-1986 Uganda. But Honorable Perez was also once in Parliament, so he may relate to what some of the things I'm saying. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Story my first point, because that is the point I had wanted to, but talk a little about myself. Thank you. I just wanted to alert my colleague, the Honorable Anna Deke, that I was in Parliament, the 7th Parliament. I was in the 8th Parliament. And I deputized the late Honorable Anya on the Committee of Legal and Parliament Affairs to amend the Constitution 2005. But I ended up being even in the cabinet as a Minister of State in charge of local government. So I have a few ideas on how some of these things work in practice. Secondly, I am an economist. I'm an economist, and for us in economics, when you are trying to analyze, to get out variables to look at in your analysis, you don't do away with what you call contextual economics. You look at the context. And as my colleague Richard says, to analyze gender and elections or gender and politics in Uganda, you have to give it historical context. How has it evolved over time? What has been realized along the way? What has been lost along the way, and why? If you don't interrogate that journey, then you will fail to understand even what you are describing today. At some point, you'll find that possibly the women themselves have betrayed their fellow women. Let me give you a few cases, just to on the surface. without going into detail. When I came to Parliament in 2001, the Deputy Speaker was a woman. 2 terms later, I mean after 10 years, the Speaker became a woman. 10 years later, the effective Speaker to date is a woman. Because literally speaking, the Right Honorable Anya the late did not preside over any serious sessions. You may want to interrogate yourself. What have those experiences in the House helped in this gender and elections process? I also want to imagine that when we are analyzing this topic, we don't limit ourselves to Ugandan experience only. Do we want to look at the Nigerian experience that had coups and military people? How come they reached some level of stability? To the extent that recently, one of the generals who has written a book invited not only the past generals who were also his colleagues as heads of state, but one of them gave a forward, the late Gowan, Jacob Gowan, who was overthrown in 1975 when he was here in Uganda. Do we want to also find out contextually how the military can be tamed rather than shying away from their participation? What are we fearing? The Ghana experience, you know that. General Rawlings was a military man. He executed almost all the generals that he found in place. But by the time he left Ghana on a certain standard that has not been violated since then. Now I'm looking at politics broadly. And that context gives opportunity for participation. Now, when I go into the participation element, what are we talking about? Many people think women participation. She has alluded to it. Hey, where is she? She's there. You see, an election or politics is a process. We may be attacking the wrong variable, or the right variable, but leaving out others. We tend to look at Parliament, representatives in Parliament, as the only measuring rod, as the only standard. But when we are constituting the Electoral Commission, how many women are there? You will always find only one woman. The rest are men. What have we done to disagree with that? Because you see, in the meeting where there are interests, definitely. I have chaired the meeting also recently. I was a board chair of Uganda Airlines. I had women, I had men, but you could see where the majority voices are, the other ones are submerged. So, Electoral Commission is one of the institutions that we must look at before we start talking about the broader women participation in the elections. How about selection? First of all, how about the staff anyway in the Electoral Commission itself? How about choosing those to oversee the various levels of elections? What is the situation in the local governments and lower local governments? Do we find a similar scenario like there is at the national level? Because when we segment, the women movement, the women interests are not limited at the national level. They must come from the grassroots as well. What is the legal context we are operating under? And what are we doing about it? What is the legal context? In my view, when you look at the various articles of the Constitution, the legal context has never been has never been unfriendly. It talks about this percentage, it talks about this percentage, it talks about but how seriously do we adhere to the legal framework that we have put in place to support equality of all gender? Now, this one is a little interesting. Let's look at the women who are fighting for. Whose interests we're talking about. And she alluded to it, I think somebody else, I think the man from the legal school. These people we are fighting for as women, do they really understand their cause? Do they understand their cause? When a woman contests in the constituency, directly elected MP, the women will be the first one to say, will she manage? This is a man's thing. Theirs is the other side. Now, will she manage this one? The women themselves are the ones who are going to hit hard against their fellow woman who is trying to tussle it out with men. At some point, I have an example. The Honorable Hope Message, you know her very well. One time she was campaigning and she had a group of women. That time it was an electoral college. And then she was telling them about their rights in the family, equal rights with husbands. By the end of the campaign, the women went saying, hey, this woman here, she wants to destroy our homes. She wants to destroy our homes. Can you imagine? She's telling us to do this, to do that. Ooh, this is unheard of. A man cannot be told that. So somebody who talked about civic education, for us economists who are quantitative, we generate all these variables and we subject them to scientific tests. What is the level of education for our voters, our women voters, and our general voters that is going to put them in a certain environment of decision making? That I'm going to make this decision without fear of failure because of this and this and this and this. Because somebody listens to radio, she reads the newspaper, she attends the clubs, she goes to this, she goes to that, and she's aware. So we tend to be much elitist, and we forget that this voter, whom we are trying to fight for, is actually still not aware of the cause itself. I think in summary, we really need to give it a context. We do comparative studies. We isolate certain variables that we think influence the process, and then we fight for the other spaces in decision making. Otherwise, you will be like writing on water. Look at these terrorists in Kawempe, the joint and something. How many women were there? Because it is natural that when you are dealing with women, some women policemen, some what should come at least handle the women. You know, this is how we have been doing it and advocate for it. But those guys you are seeing who did and what, the goons and what we are seeing, you see, you could not even see any single woman among them. So there is still a lot of work to do on that front. And some of us are willing to give a hand in thinking about that from, say, the quantitative, analytical approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, Dr. Perez, for some of us who have been doing this work for 30 years, we are now wondering when people end by saying there is a lot more work to do. I keep saying I did a master's in 1998 in gender women studies at the time, and now they are telling me there's still a sensitization. Oh my God, 30 years down the road and we are still, you know. So I guess we sort of have quite a bit of, yeah, our work is cut out. And probably now we should be asking ourselves, how do we measure success? If indeed these are the kinds of challenges that we have to contend with. Colleagues, I am going to end soon so that you can have a cup of tea, and but I'm just taking the minutes we lost in the beginning to the end. So let me see how many other people need to speak. There's one. Anyone else who wants to speak? Two. Okay. So there are about 2 or 3 people who want to speak. We will listen to those 2 or 3, and then we shall give Honorable Adeke a chance to not respond but reflect back. You know, in research, we don't want anybody to come here and feel like they have to say,
Executive Director. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
my name is Richard. So if you feel like this thing being called these titles, here at CBI it becomes too complicated. So when you say Richard, I'm fine with it.
Okay, thank you so much, Richard. My name is Victor, and I'm currently pursuing a master's in public administration. Thank you so much for your invitation today. Just to add something, one thing I think, on top of what has been said by the different participants about engaging women in politics concerning the reforms, I thought about having regular gender audits in different political parties. We understand we have different political parties, but if intentional in conducting these gender audits, it will help us identify different gaps where women can identify opportunities for growth and also be intentional right from the grassroots levels. Secondly, having effective mentorship still within the political parties, different age brackets, different experiences, so that the young can learn from the old ones, will help the women gain the courage to pick up and gain the confidence. Thank you so much.
It was at the front. Kaing, your hand was up. Please go ahead. And then I think you were the second last.
Thank you very much, Richard, for yet another set of series. I think this is a very interesting topic for all of us to think about. My first, as a gender advocate, my submission is to see how do we engage men and the boys for gender transformation. Because we have seen all the spaces, we are looking at how do we bring gender, talk about gender in elections, but also like the examples you have given, when we saw what has happened in the recent election, like the security, the judge, you haven't seen women doing that. Those are men. So until when shall we be pouring them? Why don't we start engaging men and the boys? If we engage them for gender equality, perhaps at a certain point, they will start to listen. Then too, I'm looking at this very big topic, even looking at the context. gender and elections. The picture has gone back to my mother in Chanokuzi. As Center for Basic Research and academia is here, how do we break it down with this to make everyone to understand? How are we starting to bring the masses to these critical issues? Besides a few of us perhaps who can even either be here, because this is a very big thing. So I'm looking at which kind of research can really also benefit the grassroots and well interpreted, so that this interesting topic we can have perspectives. But right now I'm engaging the top forums. But when we're talking about the issues affecting people, such as in Buganda, where I'm doing this in Ruengo with the National NGO Forum, you're not getting issues for the first time. But it shows you the lack of civic engagement on such critical issues. These things are seen. This violence has been seen. Women battered in these election processes. But where does that end? That was the things happen, but finally, they just, oh, it has happened. Oh, thank you. Okay. Now it becomes lamentation. When are we opening up the books of Acts and we close the books of lamentation and localizing this? Because now everyone is concerned. I'm telling you, everyone is concerned. When we read our people in those villages, people are seeing all these gaps. When these leaders come to give away for the gender disparity or gender positions, okay, you are elected any member of parliament. We have to question them. To what extent have they also done their role? You have gone to represent my district, women in the parliament, Ruengo. What has been your effort to ensure that gender issues at that level are being prioritized? Do you just try to wait another election cycle comes back and say, oh, send them back to represent women to get their voice there? So, when you talk about self-delivery, also the actors, how do you start to question them? And how do you help the citizens to interpret these complex, these big words as we take? And for me, time I would be happy to when you see agenda elections to also see the transitive versions, which I'm also able now to tweet to my people when I go to power like now tomorrow. I want to see how do I contextualize these series. As I get them from Kia Kampala, I take them to Rongo to see how we get those issues. I know I'll be giving you some perspectives, and where you are available, you can also come into our some of our sessions and really try to connect it further. This is a very good discussion, but I hope we shall engage it further. Thank you so much. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Dr. Tabitha will say something and we'll close. Please, you have the chance to come back and you can stand there or wherever.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you so much to Phoebe. Thank you for making it. She's done a lot of work with women and helping them access legal aid. So I listened to what Sharon said, and I totally agree with her. I think one of the things that I didn't mention within the violence is actually the sexual violence. And it's not just for the affluent women, even the grassroots women struggle with sexual violence, sexual harassment, unwanted attention when they engage in political processes. I say this because my experience previously was different as a youth member of parliament, as a university leader. When I became a grassroots leader, I had stories of councillors, female councillors at just parish level, also facing such pressure from different male counterparts who surround them. If you want me to support you, you must do this. If you want me to give you money, you must do this. And just as it is at the top, so it is at the bottom. That the men are the ones whose voices are listened to. The men are the ones with some better finances. And generally, the nature of our politics will make them vulnerable to that. Secondly, Honorable mentioned women's attitudes and women probably being enemies of their own situation. I really cannot blame women so much because we are a product of this system that has been in existence since as far as we can remember. Dismantling a culture may take more than a century because also building it was very gradual. So in a country like ours, where access to education, I mean quality education, is still not enjoyed by the general population. We have children in UPE schools who reach primary 7, they get to primary 7 and cannot write their names. But they are promoted because that is a policy of government. How then do you start to have conversations about things like this with that quality of citizenry? It's not something that everyone can equally understand as we in this place do. So the thing about many women parliamentarians is they're very aware about that. And so they choose to play safe. That's why you see the constituency seats don't attract many women. Because they know, if I'm going for this constituency, I'm already up against the general culture that this is reserved for men. That in the family, there's a chair for the man, and no one else can sit on that chair except the man. So they know what they're up against. One time, there were whispers, among these circles of women, the women movement, that, women should give space after you've been on an affirmative action seat for these so many years, you need to exit and give room for younger women, which is true, because we want to mentor and enable younger women to come into these spaces. And the easiest way is the affirmative action seat. And they were speaking and even asking, oh, now you see, like the Right Honorable Speaker, as she then was, had been in Kamuli district for how many terms? And people are saying, oh, but even at her level and her capacity, she's up against those social culture norms that say you cannot contest in this area because you are a woman. There is a woman's seat, therefore all the other seats should be for men. These are the realities that we live with every day. And to dismantle them is not work of 10 years, it's not work of 20 years, it's not work of 50 years. It's more than that. So other than that is all I just wanted to add and say thank you very much. We all try in our small ways, but I will not lie, that there is always a need to self-preserve in these spaces, because the women that get to some levels, or women generally, will be endangered. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, yeah, maybe we should just say, but first and foremost, we are agreeing that we have to be in solidarity. That one is not in question, okay? Even for us, when we analyze, we are not analyzing to find blame or to do anything, because I think to build a better progressive political culture is part of democratization. So this is not outside. You can't have democracy outside gender equality, gender sensitive democracy. It has to be the same package. And I think that's a critical one. But for us, of course, is also to inquire, to do these inquiries. We have to also trace the contradictions and say, what do these mean? How do we overcome? How do we make meaning? What are we learning? Okay? We don't want to be in only one mode, which is lamentation or whatever. No, we want to do more. But let me ask Dr. Tabitha to come and give us a short sense of what she's seeing as some of the emerging, areas of inquiry as we close. Just so that we say, okay, what does this all mean for us? Because this is important.
Thanks so much, Richard. I like that word very much. Indeed, like one or two. Once again, I will agree with you, Richard, that a smaller group like this one is very rich, gives an opportunity for more voices to be heard. And among the voices I heard, which I think I need to mention at the end, you know what is mentioned at the end is what we go with. The first one is we spent so much time and so much engagement with politics in the formal sense until one of us was given an opportunity, our sister from Akina Mama, to remind us that politics is much broader. We need to interrogate civic spaces as well. And I saw Honorable saying thank you. She's been doing a lot of work for women in legal aid. If we concentrate where we have been, we will not see what they are doing as very important. I think that is very important. And of course, the politics of everyday life that each of us are engaged with. I think we need to put on broader lenses and not just look at Parliament, which is a small element of what we should discuss, and which also is just a replication of the larger society. The other one, we are leaving out a very important thing. Someone is tired of lamentations and is suggesting we begin to act. Yes, indeed, I agree. We begin with engaging men. If we are tired of male behavior, if we are tired of the male standard, if we are tired of the negative masculinities that emerge all the time in politics, we cannot sit back. We'll engage the men and boys. We have done this in projects. Richard does that best. Male engagement. It shouldn't be only at project level. I think it's a good awakening that even in politics, seeing those scary men in scary masks, I think we need to wake up. And those women, it reminds me of those women who are crying. Our children are in prison. Our children, we should also cry. You're putting them in the wrong place. And history, internet never forgets. no mother should allow their son to do the things that some of these people are doing. I think that is a very important. Male engagement. And the other one, yes, research that benefits the masses. That it has always been a loud call that researchers talk to themselves. But increasingly, we are doing action research. Like now, what we are doing, I think we are unraveling some of those. We are responding to the criticisms. This is part of it. But also, as it's a direct appeal on methodological choices and also choosing the key actors in your research. But also very important, the recognition that the ordinary people are the center of things, and whatever we are doing it for them, and so there's nothing for us without us. Their involvement is paramount. Research that is consumable and comprehensible to the ordinary people for whom we strive. Thanks so much, Richard. And what Akatelekeka, I thank you for the facelift. I almost got lost, you know. You're competing with the new investors around there. Thanks so much for keeping the spirit of CBR and for keeping it smart and alive. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And certainly all of you, thanks for coming. The people online, thanks for signing in. As we say, CBR is a research center. And you know, in Uganda, research is an endangered thing. There are so many small people doing projects thinking they are doing research, but research is an endangered thing. People who think and write. My colleagues have put for you some books there for you to have a look. If you want any of them, you let us know. We shall arrange for that. We have here one of the best libraries in social sciences here in Uganda, and it's there for people like you to use. But that's the kind of thing that we want to do. Yes, we are struggling a little bit like every other institution. Trump made some decisions that hit all of us. But I think for us, we say we should not lose the energy to ensure that our scholarship continues, that our research continues, because it's terribly important. There are very few things you live on this world that can be remembered. But at least if you write a book or a paper with your name and it's in a shelf, at least that will stay as something that is relevant. And for us, we think that even investigating and understanding the questions we are trying to understand here is something that is important for this country. Yeah, when you look, for example, Kawempe is going to, next week, we shall be discussing something else. Okay? But if you wrote it down and sort of wrote that story, yeah, now the A-level results are out. Some of you have moved on. You can't remember JAT. But for us as researchers, we can't work like that. We have to connect the dots. We have to make sure that we are not driven by the quick things that we see around us. So thank you very much for investing time and coming and joining us. We have a cup of tea in the other side. Please join us for a cup of tea, coffee, or whatever. And if you are in Ramadan, please carry yours. At 7 o'clock, you then do what you have to do. But thank you very much all for coming, and we all wish you well. Thank you.